So the next lesson kind of goes into the basic concept of honestly, it's the 4 steps to becoming an email hero, right? All of us feel like we are struggling with email, probably in this room, and so I want you to get to a place where you don't feel like an email zero anymore, you feel like an email hero. You're not just getting average results, you're getting excellent results. And so there are 4 steps to this process, and the first step has to be getting in front of people. Because if we can't get our emails in front of people, if we can't even get them to the inbox, well, then the rest of it doesn't matter. I could talk all day about all kinds of psychology and the emails, the subject lines, all that stuff, but if you're not in front of people, it doesn't matter, right? This is mostly a technical problem, which is why we are now starting to talk about the technical stuff. The stuff that maybe isn't so sexy, maybe not so exciting. It's maybe not going to keep you fully awake for every lesson that we're going through, but I will try to be funny to help with that, okay? But it's mostly a technical problem. So you saw, like with Dan, the first thing I did is I started looking at the back end, like what's he using for this tool, what's he using for that tool, what's his domain strategy, how everything's look, like working, what are the DNS record things that I'm going to have to deal with. It's all technical because you have to do that part first. So the technical part is going to come down to your domain strategy, the tools that you're using and how you've set them up, and your DNS records. All right? So we're going to start with domain strategy. In order to figure out what the domain strategy should be, we have to start asking key questions or making some key considerations. And the first one, just like you saw with the example I used in the previous session, is list size and type. Do we have a bunch of purchased and scraped email addresses? Do we have a bunch of people who've opted in for something? Now, there's a difference between I opted in yesterday and I opted in 5 years ago, for sure, right? So old could also be cold, okay? And we'll deal with that. There's always going to be some gray area in there. But we just need to understand, just generally speaking, are these people that wanted stuff from us, or are these people that don't know who the freak we are and why we're going to show up in front of them? And then how big is this list? Because as we're thinking about our domain strategy, we need to think about that volume and consistency, the normal cadence that we're going to be creating for the domain. And if the normal cadence needs to be 100,000 emails a day, that's a much different adventure that we're about ready to go on than if the normal cadence needs to be 100 emails a couple of times a week, right? So I want to understand the list size. So before we can decide the best domain strategy, we need to know, are we talking cold email, purchase scraped, lead gen company, or are we talking warm opted in? I'm just going to divide it there. We could go deeper, but we're just going to call those the 2 segments, right? And a quick note about cold email. Cold email is not email marketing. It's not email marketing. It's traffic. It's like if you push a Facebook ad out and you're doing your best with interest-based targeting or whatever you're doing, you're trying to get people to raise their hand with some level of interest, or if you go door knocking, or if you do cold calling, or whatever it is you do where people didn't come to you and say, I'm interested in this thing, or have interest in what you're talking about, it's traffic. You're trying to fill your pipeline, right? This is before the list, okay? So like cold calling, door knocking, and running ads, cold email ruins things. It ruins stuff a lot, and it ruins it fast. And so it ruins the domains you're using. It ruins the IPs or the servers that are doing all the sending in the background. And if those servers don't belong to you, if they belong to Mailgun or SendGrid or Amazon, they might have a say in whether or not they like what you're doing, because you're ruining their stuff now. By the way, those are their business assets. Those are the biggest business asset that they have. Those servers, that is their business. So if those servers aren't performing well for these 100 people over here because this doofus over here is doing stuff that's messing up the reputation of the server, well then now we have a problem, right? So cold email ruins things. It ruins email accounts. And it definitely ruins vendor accounts or vendor relationships. So like if you have a MailChimp account and you send out a bunch of cold email, they might slap your hand on that. They might not like the numbers and what you're doing, and they might say, we're going to shut you down. Somebody was shut down, I think it was you. Was it Sherry? You got shut down from Kartra or something?
Well, yeah, almost.
Yeah, gave you 24-hour notice. I thought that was very kind, actually. Most shutdowns don't involve a notice or any kind of a courtesy like that. For a blog post, yeah. It's all, the players, they all have the rules, right? Okay, so cold email ruins things. So it requires an entirely different strategy. what we're talking about today, tomorrow, and the next day is not a cold email strategy, other than I'll do a lesson on it, right? So I'm gonna actually cover cold email in a separate lesson. So as you're sitting in there and you're thinking about, well, what about cold? Can I do that with cold? I'm just gonna say, let's hold all those questions, because we're gonna talk about it when we get to the actual cold email session, okay? So assuming that this is warm now, these are people that opted in, list size and type we're looking at, but we're now starting to look at traffic source and volume. It's not enough to know how big the list is now and what kind of contacts you have if I don't also understand how fast is that sucker growing. Do you have an ad that's going to start on Monday? We're going to get hundreds of leads every day, every week, and I don't know that this is happening. That's going to cause me a problem, because now I've got all that to deal with and whatever you already had, right? So I need to know those kinds of things ahead of time, and I want you guys to start thinking about them ahead of time too. What are the traffic sources for building that list, and what kind of volume increases are we looking at over the next days, weeks, months? I usually ask people, how many leads are you bringing in every day, every week, something like that. And then they tell me whether they want it to be an everyday thing or an every week thing. I don't really care. I just need a general understanding of how big this is coming at me, right? Then where is the traffic coming from? I want to understand the quality of this traffic. I also want to understand the quantity, how many new leads are coming in. So we're differentiating now the quality of the leads that are coming in and the quantity of the leads that are coming in. A few per day versus a few thousand per day, or tens of thousands of leads per day. And that might sound ridiculous, but I have clients who do these weird things where somebody like Ellen DeGeneres or Ashton Kutcher, if I'm saying his name right, you know, they'll like send something out and all of a sudden they'll get 30,000 some odd leads in like a day. And that changes the strategy. I'll just say that. That just changes the strategy, okay? Then the next thing we're looking at is your send volume needs. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I have 10,000 people on my list, but I only send a few hundred emails a week. Awesome. Is that what you want to keep doing? Are we staying there? Is that a happy place for you? We're going to start doing some other things. Well, you know, I really wanted to start sending a newsletter. Or, you know, I have this thing I'm going to launch and I need to get some emails out about it. Awesome. I need to understand the send volume needs, because it's not just how big the list is and how fast it's growing, is how much do you want to actually be rolling out? That's going to affect our domain strategy decisions. So how many emails need to go out in a day? And you saw me ask that question of Dan, right? Like, how big is your list and how many emails do you need to send per day? Are we talking a few hundred a day, a few thousand a day, tens or even hundreds of thousands of emails a day? We have clients that send large volumes. We have clients that send, you know, a trickle, right? And what are we shooting for is really all I'm after. So this is the stuff that I want you guys to think about right now for your own situation. How many emails need to go out in a day for your situation? And go ahead and just like write that down, and I'm going to ask some numbers here in a minute. What are you actually shooting for? So how many are you sending right now on a daily or weekly basis? Get an idea of that. And what are you shooting for? What do you need to be sending? What do you want to be sending? And this isn't like, how much money would you like to make monthly? $1 million. I'm saying, like, generally speaking, I'm sending, let's say, 50 to 100 emails a day just through automations, but I also need to start marketing for this thing that we're doing, and I need to be able to send to my whole list, which is, let's say, 5,000 people. So I'm going to need to be able to send something to 5,000 people in order to do that. At least once, right? Hopefully more. When we're talking about warm-up, remember, and I'll go into this lesson separate, but like when we're talking about warming up and you're thinking about the double every day strategy, which I use, which is very aggressive. I'm going to say that over and over because I want you guys to understand you're about ready to get into something that's aggressive. It's not like, oh, this should work for everybody. It's like, no, this is something we monitor. You can get up to 25,000 inside of 9 days, right? Because it's double every day. So it doesn't take that long to get to the numbers that you're talking, and once you're to 25, then you're to 50 on the next day, right? Like with Dan, I got him up to 18, and I was like, go for it. Because I knew his list was like 36,000 people or whatever. Just go for it, right? Maybe it was closer to 40, I don't remember, but it's just math, right, at that point.